DreAllDay.com.
Now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, we are in part 3 of our 3-part series on Lawfare, how Lawfare actually works. If you've never heard of it before, make sure you go back 2 episodes so you can get the introduction where I explain what Lawfare actually is, how it works, and some examples of where it is actively working right now that you would know about if you understood the word. And once I give you the examples, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And with that out the way, let's just pick up. First of all, let me remind you, my text message number down below in the description and the link to my university, Work on Your Game University program. Also down in the description to this episode, you want to have me as your personal coach, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. And with that out the way, let's pick up where we were, which is part 3, point number 7 of our ongoing series here of how Lawfare works. Number 7, everything that I've told you so far, all these things that are done to you and about you and done with the purpose of affecting you, know all this is done before you have been found guilty of anything. You may not have even appeared in front of a jury for a trial yet. You may never even see a trial, but all of these things have happened already. And again, you haven't been found guilty of anything. Because remember, human beings are very susceptible to their emotions and their feelings. Most people do not think, they don't read, and they're lazy. So when they hear that you have a negative charge against you and they already are predisposed to not like you for whatever reason, and or whatever the charge is against you makes them predisposed to not like you, they don't need to know the facts of the situation. They can just go off their feelings. That's enough. They have enough information to convict you in their minds. So you're convicted in a court of public opinion, at least amongst a certain percentage of the population. This is how it works. And it happens that fast. Keep in mind, all of these things take place, again, before you have had a chance to speak your piece in a court of law. You can't get on social media because maybe you got kicked off everything. Nobody wants to hear anything you have to say because of negative news about you. And everything you say for the rest of your life, there's going to be a percentage of people who just come out with some negative statement towards you that has something to do with that negative thing that was said about you, whatever number of years ago. And again, you haven't had a chance to defend yourself yet. For example, I'll give you another example. There's a former NFL football player by the name of Ray Lewis. Most of you know who Ray Lewis is if you follow sports at all. Very famous football player, well-known Hall of Fame player. And Ray Lewis, in I believe it was the year 2000 or 2001, his team was playing in the Super Bowl in Atlanta. Ray Lewis got caught up in some type of situation off the field. Somebody ends up dying. Ray Lewis ends up, I believe he got some type of, he had a criminal charge against him. I believe he beat some of them, but he hadn't, I believe it was obstruction of justice is what he eventually either got found guilty or charged with. But the whole thing is, the long and short of it is, because a lot of people don't remember the details of the story. The long and short of it, actually, let me ask ChatGPT. It'll tell me exactly what happened so I can tell y'all what happened. What was the charge and conclusion of the Ray Lewis situation in Atlanta several years ago when he was still playing? So I'm going to tell you what happened here via ChatGPT. So it was in 2000. He was at a Super Bowl party where 2 men got fatally stabbed during a fight outside of a nightclub. 2 men got stabbed. Now, Ray Lewis was charged in connection with the incident. So Ray was initially charged with murder along with 2 other men. So 3 people got charged with murder. Ray Lewis was one of the 3 people charged with murder. He eventually had reached a plea deal. Basically meaning he didn't go to trial. He just reached a deal with the court so that he didn't have to go to trial. He pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice, which is a misdemeanor, not a felony. And in exchange to pleading guilty to obstruction of justice, the murder charges against Ray Lewis were dropped. He got sentenced to 12 months of probation, and he testified against the 2 other guys who were charged with murder. And he admitted that he provided misleading information to investigators after the incident, and the white suit that he was wearing that had blood on it that night was never found, and it became a point of controversy. So both those other men who got charged, they were actually acquitted of murder because they were not proven guilty. And the families of the victims were settled out of court with a lawsuit for undisclosed amounts. I'm giving you all that to tell you this. So Ray Lewis, again, a couple people got murdered outside of a club. Ray was somehow, some way involved. He got charged with murder initially. He took a plea deal to accept an obstruction of justice misdemeanor plea, and then he testified against the other guys. The other guys didn't even get found guilty. And now, to this day, anytime I see Ray Lewis on X, on social media, and he says anything, he's not even, most of the time he's talking about football or life or God or something like that. He's not talking anything about that case. Of course, he doesn't mention it. Anytime he says anything, if I look at the post, I already know what's going to be happening in that post is that a bunch of people are going to be making comments about you're a murderer, shut up, you killed people a few years ago. Still to this day, this is 25 years ago, people are still doing this with Ray Lewis. So I see Ray Lewis 5 days ago from when I'm doing this recording, he made a post about Lamar Jackson, who's a quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, the same team that Ray Lewis played for during his career. I'm going to click on this post and see, are people still talking about, looks like he's calling this guy the greatest for whatever reason. And looks like maybe it started to cool off with Ray Lewis because I'm looking through this and I don't see anybody making any comments about Ray Lewis and murder or anything like that. I'm looking at one of his previous posts before that. And it looks like maybe it's calmed down, but it wasn't even too many years ago. Wasn't even too many years ago that anytime this guy said anything, people would come in there with the murder comments. The same thing with O.J. Simpson, for example. He got found not guilty, didn't he? People are coming with the murder comments every single time O.J. Simpson says something. The whole point of it is they destroy your name and your reputation to the point that it's a stain on you for the rest of your life. And people who don't want to like you can use it against you forever. And there's not really much you can do against it about it. The purpose of lawfare is not necessarily to incarcerate you. The purpose of lawfare is not necessarily to take your assets, because even if they seize them, you get found, they found there's no charge, they got to give you your stuff back eventually. The purpose is to scare you and everyone around you and anyone who is a fan of or influenced by you to be intimidated into silence so that whatever you were doing that pissed them off in the first place, you stop doing it. That's the purpose of lawfare. It's just to shut you up. If you happen to end up in jail, that's cool, because in the United States judicial system and the others who are aiming to be fair, other countries, that does not have to be the outcome for lawfare to be successful. All they got to do is just make you look bad. I mean, did the lawfare against Donald Trump work? Generally, you could say it didn't because he won the election, but also you could say it did because there are a bunch of people who still will hate him forever, and they will use the stuff that got brought against him as reason to hate him. So it did work in that way because it got a bunch of people to believe certain things about him, and they're never going to change their minds. Is this true or not? Same thing with Andrew Tate. He didn't even go to trial. He got a bunch of people who will never accept anything coming out of his mouth just because they have been conditioned to believe he's a bad guy, and they have the legal charges against him as evidence as why he's a bad guy, even though the legal charges turned out to be paper thin, worth nothing. This is enough to convince most people of most things. So think about that. Think about if that was you, and you don't have the fans that these people have. So even the gentlemen I mentioned, as I said, so far in this series, didn't get jail time, but their names are permanently stained. You see how this works? No jail time. Might not even go to trial, but your name is stained. Moving on, point number 8. Today's topic, once again, is how lawfare actually works. Let me ask you a question. How many people do you know who can survive what I've described so far? Let me ask you another question. How would you survive what I've described so far? How would you survive this? It's not limited to famous people, by the way. All right, famous people, I'm using them as examples because you know who they are. You know Andrew Tate, Donald Trump, Ray Lewis, O.J. Simpson. You know who they are. Mike Vick, you know who they are. What if you're not famous and they do this to you? See, the famous people, at least they got a legion of fans defending them every day, and people arguing about them every day. Whether they hate them or love them, people are talking about them because they're famous. What if you're not famous? Nobody's talking about you, but the same shit is happening. And you may say, well, Dre, people aren't going to be trashing my name that much because I'm not famous. Well, the thing is, the fact that you're not famous might end up hurting you because there's not a whole bunch of good stuff about you to counterbalance the negative shit. So if you go and try to apply for a job somewhere and people decide they're just going to Google you to find out who you are, everything that comes up about you is going to be negative shit because there wasn't a whole bunch of positive shit because nobody knew who you were before. So everything on the internet about you is going to be negative, 100%. Like if they brought lawfare against me, all right, hopefully this doesn't happen, but hey, maybe it will happen one day based on things that I talk about. They bring lawfare against me, right? There's 20 years of positive shit said about me and by me around my name. to counterbalance any negative shit you could possibly say about me. But what if you don't have that 20 years of track record and all the stuff on the internet about you is just people trashing your name? I was just watching this video the other day on YouTube. It was a two-part interview of a girl who had been scammed, basically coerced and forced into doing a porn video under the guise of it being a fitness video. And then she basically ended up getting forced into doing a porn video. You could go watch the whole episode yourself. It's a two-part series, this girl being interviewed. And it was called Girls Do Porn was the name of the site. And the guys she went up and it became a federal case. And it was her and several other girls had claimed the same thing had happened to them. And they recorded the porn video, put the porn video out. The video ends up on Pornhub and all these other sites. This girl had never done porn, wasn't even aiming to do porn, but the video comes out. And now that video's out and has trashed and stained her name and her family's name for many years. It was several years between the time that the incident happened and the video came out and then the case that basically exonerated her, but the video was still out there. Now imagine somebody goes and Googles her. Still to this day, that video is still showing up. Still to this day, that name is connected to that porn video, and she wasn't even trying to do that. That's the stain that they put on you. And if you didn't have a name before that, again, the only thing on your name is that negative shit. You understand? So how many people do you know who can survive this? At least the famous people have a bunch of people defending them. What does somebody who's not famous have? All this is happening while you're suffering in silence if you ain't famous. You ain't got no fans cheering for you. Now, while, again, I've been using the famous people as examples, understand the same stuff happens to people who are not famous, don't have fans, don't have a bunch of supporters keeping their names, their innocence, or defending them in any way in any type of public sphere. There's nobody talking about them and saying, yo, there's something wrong with what they're doing here. When they banned Donald Trump off social media, I wrote an article. I said, something about this don't sound right. When they banned Andrew Tate off all the platforms, I said, something about this does not sound right. But see, there are other people who had the same thing happen to them. I don't know who they are, so I didn't write about it. I didn't make episodes about it because I didn't know about it. But they still had to deal with the same shit. And on a smaller scale, they still got to go out and live life. They still got to go to a job interview. They still have family. They still have neighbors. They still have people who have to look them up. They still got to go apply for an apartment and get Googled. All right, what do you do then? They still get background checks done on them. What do you do? See, if they do this to you and you're a nobody, you don't have nearly as much recourse as a well-known person has. A well-known person gets recourse that they don't even have to try to get because of their fan base. If you don't have your own platform or your own megaphone from which to speak your piece, what do? You don't have an email list with 10, 20, 50, 100,000 people on it. What do you do? Even someone like myself, I don't have millions of followers, but I got a lot. If they did it to me, there would be a percentage of the population looking to hear me say what I had to say because they already know who I am and I've already built some know, like, and trust factors with an audience of people. But if you have zero audience and they do this to you, who do you turn to get the word out about yourself? See, there are things that you can do, yes, but you have a lot fewer options than somebody who's already well known. For example, think of the people who were at Washington, D.C. on January 6th who ended up getting charged and incarcerated behind what happened. How many of you can name 3 people from January 6th? 3 people who were charged with a crime and incarcerated. They either were incarcerated or they're still incarcerated right now. How many of you can name 3 people? Most of you can't name one. Everybody knows what January 6th is. Most of you can't name one person. Many of them are not well-known influencers. They are suffering in silence, or they did suffer in silence. They're still suffering. Even if after you get out of jail, you still suffer in silence because your name is connected to that forever. Somebody Googles you, guess what's going to come up? Oh, they got arrested on January 6th. All right, where are you going to get a job at with that on your name? You understand? Because of the weight of the law being thrown at them, they are put in a certain space that it's hard to get out of. Many of them don't have a podcast where they can explain themselves. They can explain what they did, why they did it, or the results of the response. They can't do any of that because they don't have the platform. So think about this lawfare thing. And again, don't think that this only happens to famous people. This happens to all types of people. If you happen to be saying something that they don't like, they can decide to bring it against you. This is why it takes balls to come out and say what you really believe, knowing that you might be pissing some people off when you do it, which is why this ain't for everybody. Moving on to point number 9, final point in this series. Today's topic, once again, is how lawfare works. Number 9, all of this is what happens when you go against the grain, when you go against the matrix. When you go against the powers that be, who want to tell you that a boy can become a girl, who want to tell you that men running society is a bad idea, even though the society we live in, everything in it was built by men. somehow men are wrong and we should put women in charge, and you pushing back against that makes you a toxic masculine man, and all the other nonsense that you're supposed to take the jab that is allegedly supposed to inoculate you from a disease, and then if you go take the 6 boosters, you'll be even more inoculated, and then you get the virus anyway, and then they tell you, oh no, it doesn't inoculate you, it just means it won't be as bad. Oh, okay. And if you push back against any of this, don't forget the cloth mask to put on your face, that the note on the box of that mask says this does not prevent the spread of airborne viruses. You go against any of that, they might decide to come after you. This is how lawfare works. When you go against the grain of what has been generally accepted by the masses and the sheep, you are putting yourself in a line of fire that you might get fired on. You might not get fired on, but you might get fired on. You don't know it's coming until it comes. That's the way it works. Specifically, when everybody else is too cowardly to point out the bullshit, even though everybody knows it's bullshit, but you're the 1 or 2 or 3 people who's saying something, you are the 1 or 2 or 3 who get used as an example to show everybody else, if you go against the grain, we're going to do the same thing to you that we did to them. And if only a handful of people have balls, then they will do that to that handful of people. But see, here's the fix. Here's how you solve lawfare. If everybody fucking had balls, they can't do it to everybody. See, they can only do it to a few if there are only a few. But to see, if there are 1 million people having balls, they can't go after 1 million people. It's impossible. They don't have the resources. It's not impossible, excuse me. They don't have the resources to do it. That's the issue. See, the real problem is that most of the people in the masses are just cowards. Because if everyone said that something is unacceptable, the matrix cannot they can't single out everyone. You can single out a few from the group. If most people are quiet and a few are speaking up, you just silence the loud people. But if everybody's speaking up, what you gonna do? You can't silence everybody. See, the actual reason why lawfare exists and the reason that it can thrive is because a bunch of people agree with what lawfare, they agree with what people who are calling the bullshit out are saying, but they won't agree out loud. They agree quietly. See, if everybody agreed out loud, then again, people in power can't justify doing what they do because they will look ridiculous. Eventually, there wouldn't be any people to support what they're doing, and they say, oh, we can't keep doing this. This politically is going to kill us. We can't do that. Wouldn't work. Let's recap today's class, which is part 3 of our 3-part mini-series, How Lawfare Works. Number 7, all of this happens before you've been found guilty of anything. You may never even go to court to where you could be found guilty or innocent of anything. They just bring the charges against you to destroy you in as many ways as possible without any actual legal conclusions being reached. Point number 8, how many people do you know who can survive this, who can go through all of that and still be standing when it's done? Most people cannot. This is one of the reasons why, which leads to point number 9, why most people are quiet. All right, this happens when you go against the grain in the matrix. Most people don't go against the grain. They may think against the grain and may quietly have some beliefs that go against the grain, but they won't say them out loud and they won't express them. They won't be out there with them because they don't want to deal with the blowback that comes with the people who get made examples of. The issue is, if everyone would come out and say, this is bullshit, we're not doing this, they can't go after everybody, but they can go after a few if only a few people are speaking up. So that's the open, unspoken challenge that I'm going to lay at the feet of everybody who's listening to this right now. All that said, workonyourgameuniversity.com. All right, you want to build up your voice. You want to build up your communication skills, get clear on what you want to put out there into the world, which may have nothing to do with what I'm talking about here. But get clear on what you want to put out there into the world so that you can be fully empowered to be the best version of yourself in your business and in your personal life, so that you have all your shit together. So if some lawfare does come your way, you got the resources to deal with it. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Have me as your direct coach, and let's move from there. Work on your game. Dre, all